Okay, part 2, we're going to talk about the school setting. Now, I need you to understand, ABA is not in the schools all over the state. There's some states that don't have it at all, and there's some states that actually it's embedded. Now, I've been in the school system since I started my career in the school system. And every single school case that I have, it's been different. So originally, I was set up in this, we had our own CBL classroom, and we had a BCBA and a SPED teacher that ran that classroom. All the kids, we had about 8 kids. They were all one-to-one, and there was 2 friends that were always paired together. So yeah, we had a sensory room, our own little classroom, and then we had another alternative room and the other across the hall. Typically, the kids were pulled into their regular class during the morning time and gym and the specials and recess, and some of them went to lunch. And then also during like circle time. Otherwise, they were in our classroom the whole time getting individualized support, and we ran our classroom like a regular classroom. And also our CBL classroom also had our own specials and that we would attend to during the week. So sometimes our kids would have double specials during the day if they went with their typical classroom, or sometimes our kids were just in our CBL classroom. That was the ideal. That was like the best setup that I had ever experienced in the school setting, having a BCBA and a SPED teacher actually run the curriculum inside the classroom. And then the contract was bought out by a different company, so we had to leave the school setting in the town, which I was in Waterbury at the time. So we had a couple magnet schools. So we had 2 kids in a magnet school, and we had our own like ABA classroom type of thing. But it was not like a classroom. So we had our own little cubbies that were by the counselor sections, and we would do DTI and programs in that room, and then we would pull them into their typical classroom. And then the BCBA was not there every day. So she'd check in a couple times a week, and we would just update programs and tell her what we're struggling with, and she'd bring materials and this and this and that. Then after that, I went to the home setting, and I was in a home setting for a while until my company got, the family wanted only me to work with the daughter. So the school district had to contract with my company to get me into the school to provide the one-to-one support for her in the school setting. And that was also in a magnet school. So when you deal with magnet schools, at least what I've dealt with, like they don't have, a lot of schools actually, they don't have a special ed classroom. Like you get pulled for SPED for like 30 minutes, a couple days a week. Like there is no special ed classroom where a special ed teacher is running a whole classroom by themselves. Like, no. And so we actually had to find places to do DTI, throughout the school. Like I know we're in the library at one point, and then we're inside a teacher's lounge at one point, and then we're also in between like the speech and the OT and the PT, when the outside providers, OT and PT, would come in a couple days a week for their clients. So we kind of like took over that spot too. And I'm sharing this because if the child's supposed to have a dedicated space in the school, like they're supposed to have a dedicated space in the school, especially if the IEP says that. And if there's not a dedicated space, then like they'll just be like, oh, here's a table, like here's your dedicated space, like this is your only space, blah blah blah. And then I've also worked in a school that had a seclusion room. This was a class where they had 3rd graders to 7th grade. There was about 7 students in the classroom, and they all had one-to-one support because they were severely behavioral students. Like these were kids that got expelled from all the other districts, and they come together in one classroom. There was a student in there that actually like graduated, and he came back 2 days later because he went back to typical school and stabbed somebody, and he came back. He stabbed somebody with a pencil, not with a knife, but still that is dangerous behavior. And then as a BCBA, I was consulting with the school districts up here with my previous company. And so how that works is they consult with the outside provider. We were the outside provider, and they had certain kids that they needed support. So then we would bring our team in from our organization and supply the RBT support throughout the kids' school day. And there was another school district where we actually come in to train the paras. And then eventually they decided to just hire us on board because the training wasn't going well and they needed the intense support. So when it comes to the school setting, some things to consider is that you have to be part of a multidisciplinary team, depending on the setting and the consistency and stuff like that. Some schools are just in and out, like, oh yeah, there's the behaviorists, you know, but then other schools, you are there committed, you're in the classrooms, you're learning all the teachers, you're inside their services too, because you're supporting our kid and we're taking data. Especially if you have a child, if you have a student and they have SPED, you should be sitting in the SPED session. If they have speech, you should be sitting in the speech session. You should never be leaving your student alone with service providers, because you still have to collect data, and you have to understand too, like, everyone has a different approach, and you're there to support your learner, especially if they have like a token board, especially when it comes to work demands. Like, I had a student that always had problems in his SPED services. And I had to teach a SPED teacher how to use his token board so that he didn't overwork him for like minimal demands. And this student had ODD on top of autism, so like hearing no, and the SPED teacher would be like, no, 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 no. Like, he'd say no like 10 times, and I'm telling him, like, stop saying no. No, 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 no. Just be like, okay, like just don't do that. And you're gonna see too, like, there's a lot of different personalities that you have to consider when you're in the school system, and a lot of people don't understand ABA, so there's going to be a lot of pushback, or there's some service providers that are just not a fan of ABA, which is obviously okay, but also you need to understand that as a multidisciplinary team, you have to come together for this learner and collaborate. But overall, the school setting is it's fun because it's structured every single day. You have routines, you could prime your student, there's transitions, sometimes they have a decent amount of service providers, so you're still in a session, but it gives you a little break from having to give so many demands. And when I say so many demands, it's like we're helping our learners navigate the school, right? So if the teacher said, all right, guys, do problem number 1, and our kid has ADHD, he probably forgot what the problem is, so we have to remind them, which is a demand of what we have to do. Okay, what do we have to do? Like, I already had to do number 1. You see what I mean? So it's like when they have a one-to-one, it's there's a lot more attention that's given, and it's a lot towards like getting work done, right? So it's nice to have a break when they have service providers, because now it's like someone else is giving them demand, so it kind of gives you a break. And also too, it's like they get to generalize instructional control across settings with different providers, which is important. But also too, another important reason why you should be sitting in on a session is because you need to generalize what they're learning in that service provider session throughout the week. Like, think about it. Sometimes these kids only see them once a week, and it's like, especially if it's speech, like speech is important, so you're going to want to carry over. And naturalistically, like if they're working on prepositions or like, you know, different concepts that you can target throughout the week because you saw it get done in speech, it's like generalizing again. Like, generalizing is so important in our field, especially with our learners. And like I said before, you want to generalize across people, settings, environments. Those are all the same things. But like concepts, like, you see what I mean? Also too, when it comes to the school, you get out early. You're in early and you're out early. So like, that was a perk, being able to be done with work at 3:30 in the middle of the day while everyone else gets out of work at 5. So it's like I was able to have a pretty cool balanced work life, right? Also too, when we're contracted, right? We're contracted with a school district, but it was only for that one kid. So let's say that kid calls out sick, then you're asked out of work. Like, unless your company has another kid for you to work with, then you have to be out of work. And like I said, it really depends on the setup, because I was at a school where when we were contracted with the school district, we had to do 40 hours. So if the kid was not there, then you still had to stay there and like prep material and do some other stuff. And we had like 10 PD days. Like, I couldn't stand that part of the job.